right, no punches left to throw with. 1.3, distance and midpoint. So hopefully you remember from Algebra 1 that you did learn how to measure the distances between things and then how to find the midpoint between things. And so that's what we're going to do today. Just a little review. All right, so we're going to start off pretty easy by finding the distances on a number line. If I ask you to find the distance between, I don't know, 4 and 7, you can easily count. But the mathematical way is to find the distance between two numbers. You simply subtract the smaller number from the larger number. So big number minus small number. Let's do an example. Let's go ahead and find the distances from 4 to 6. So if you look at the picture, you can see the space in between the 4 and the 6 is 2. So the distance is 2, but to do it mathematically, it's bigger number minus small number. So 6 minus 4 gives you 2. It gets a little bit tricky when we have negative numbers. 5 and negative 8. So the distance from 5 all the way to negative 8. So again, you can sit there and you can count all the spaces in between 5 and negative 8. But mathematically, you would take the big number minus the small number. Now, in this case, you have to notice that the big number is 5 and the small number is negative 8. Because of the negative, it makes it really small. So 5 minus negative 8. Notice I put the negative 8 in parentheses. That is important because you have to change the minus and the negative to plus. All right, and the answer is 13. Let's do one more for fun. I want to find the distance from negative 14 to 81. Notice I chose these numbers on purpose because they do not fit in the number line that I give you. And so you could not sit there and count if you wanted to. You would have to do it mathematically. Big number minus small number. Big number is 81 minus the small number, which is negative 14. Again, be careful with the negative 14 because you do have to do the change to get 95. But what if I ask you to find the distance that's not on the number line, but instead the distance on the coordinate plane, like the distance from 5, 8 to negative 3, 2. Hopefully you remember something called the distance formula. There it is. The distance formula is equal to the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So let's practice that formula again. Let's find the distance from negative 4, negative 6 to 5, negative 1. Now remember, you get to choose whichever you want as x1, y1, x2, y2. This will be my x1, y1, and this will be my x2, y2. And again, it doesn't really matter. You can do it in whatever order you want as long as you stay consistent. All right? There it is, plugging into the formula. Square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, I threw in a whole bunch of parentheses because I wanted those negatives to stand out. All right, because those negatives can be tricky and they can mess you up. Simplify a little bit. So those negatives turn positive. Do parentheses first. Square everything. Add them together. And then you can either use a calculator to square root 106 or just leave it 106 square rooted as your answer. I would rather you leave your answer square root of 106. And if 106 can be simplified, you would need to simplify it more. All right, let's go ahead and do the midpoint on a number line. So earlier we did the distance, how long something is. Now we're going to do the midpoint, which is the thing that's in the middle of everything. All right, To find the midpoint on a number line, simply add the two numbers together and then divide by 2. Easy enough. Add them together and divide by 2. Let's go ahead and do a few examples. Let's go ahead and find the midpoint between 6 and 2. And again, you can physically sit there and count the spaces in between. Here's 6, here's 2, count in between, one space here, one space here, one space here, one space here, and our midpoint is 4. That's very easy to do when you can count, but mathematically, the way you set it up is you just add the two numbers together and divide it by 2. All right, so 6 plus 2 is 8, and then divide that by 2 and you get 4. Let's do another one. The midpoint between 6 and -7. Again, all you got to do is add the two numbers together and divide it by 2. 6 added with a -7 gives you a -1, and then you just have to divide that by 2, and then you get -1/2 is where the middle would be. What happens when you go off the number line and then you're asked to go onto the coordinate plane again? Just like the distance formula, we also have the midpoint formula when we're working on a coordinate plane. Hopefully you guys remember that formula. There it is. It's basically the same thing we just did. Add the two numbers and divide it by 2. Add the two numbers and divide it by 2. So you just add the x's together and then the y's together. All right, let's do an example. Let's go ahead and find the midpoint between 512 and -4/8. I just simply plug everything into the formula. The x's added together divided by 2 and the y's added together divided by 2. Simplifying it, you do get 1/2 and 20/2, but if you notice 20/2 can be reduced just a little bit more. There's our final answer, 1/2, 10. Let's look at a tricky one. This one, I actually give you the midpoint. So I basically give you the answer, and then I give you one endpoint. You have to find the other endpoint. Okay? So I give you the answer, you have to find the other endpoint. It makes it a little bit tricky, and it's just the same thing as like going backwards, and it's not too bad. So let's go ahead and go backwards. Let's start off with the formula. We know that the answer to this is here. That's what we did earlier, but this time I give you the answer. So this has to equal that. And there's my setup. And then here is just basic algebra to solve. Multiply both sides by 2. Subtract 5 from both sides. And there's our -3. All right, and then we're going to do the same thing for the y values. Notice this should equal this value. Oh, and then I forgot to tell you to plug the 2 into either the first y or the second y, it doesn't matter. I plugged it into the second y, so I actually plugged it into here. That's what I did with the 5 earlier. I plugged it into here. All right, do a little bit of algebra 1, multiply both sides by 2, subtract 2, and we have -2. So those two answers together gives us the point that's on the other end of the line, -3, -2. Finally, our last slide of the day. Let's do some algebra. This one is actually taking it back to the number line. It says, suppose that M is the midpoint of segment AC. Here's segment A, here's segment C. M is the midpoint, so it has to be in the middle. I haven't officially defined midpoint, but I'll tell you now, midpoint means exactly in the middle. All right. And then I give you more information. AM is 3x minus 4, and MC is 5x minus 2, 5x minus 26. All right. And again, I have to emphasize the word midpoint. Middle. What does middle mean? Middle means that this segment and this segment should be equal. If M is in the middle, then those two segments are equal. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to set them equal to each other. And then this becomes a very easy Algebra 1 problem to solve. Combine like terms, divide both sides by 2. We have x equals 11. All right, so that is all we have for today. Go ahead and try your homework and get back to me if you need to.